Well, thanks for joining us this morning, 11:11. Good to have you all here. I didn't know if you were going to do that or not. There you go. If we want to prosper in life, and I'm not just talking about financially, I just mean a sense of well-being, a sense of blessing, a sense we're at the end of our life. We look back and say, what an incredible ride. We just have to understand the way things work, or we're gonna keep making mistakes we don't even realize. And the challenge is the way things work can be different in different parts of the country. My wife and I grew up on the West Coast, and there are certain things that are just different there. We were reminded of this when we were in Newport Beach a month ago, and we stepped into a crosswalk, and the cars stopped. We forgot what that was like, because we've been living in Texas for 7 years. I remember back in Texas, if you step into the crosswalk, cars stop half a mile away so you don't feel intimidated, right? Or you'd be threatened. In fact, if you're in the crosswalk in Portland, Oregon, and it's raining, they not only stop, they get out and they lay their coat across the puddle so your feet don't get wet. But there's something about Houston that's just different. If you step into a crosswalk in Houston, drivers speed up. I swear I'm here. Oh, you think you're gonna cross? You're gonna be wearing my paint. You know, I was just like, this is a country, this is a state that loves Jesus, but you forget you love Jesus when you get behind the steering wheel. I've just never seen anything like it. The challenge is that my wife discovered that it is actually Texas state law. When a pedestrian steps into the crosswalk, the drivers are supposed to stop. That's Texas state law. And my wife is determined single-handedly to enforce Texas state law, which is why it's terrifying to go walks with her around the Heights. We were on the Nicholson Trail coming up to 11th not too long ago. The speed limit there is 35 miles per hour, which of course means Houston drivers are driving 50 miles per hour. And Lisa steps out into the street. I'm like, honey, be careful. She goes, Gary, it's Texas state law. I said, well, there's another law I'm worried about. She goes, what's that? I go, it's the law of physics. That Escalade's going 50 miles per hour. Weighing what you weigh, you're gonna be halfway to San Antonio before you know what happens. If my wife is gonna live long in the world, she's gonna have to accept this is just the way things are. Now, we don't have to guess the way things are spiritually. God, in his kindness and goodness, has given us 5 books in the Bible. They're often called the wisdom books. And we're going to be focusing on one of those, the book of Proverbs. Ben and I are going to be team teaching this. And Proverbs is essentially God's instruction manual saying, hey, I created this world. This is the way it works. If you do this, you're going to be blessed. If you do this, things are not going to go well for you. So we don't have to find out by experience. If we just accept that God is giving us this manual, this is what you need to know. So we're gonna have a refrain that goes through every sermon. You're gonna be tested on this next week by Ben, so make sure you get it. Whenever the speaker says, wisdom works, you're supposed to reply, so go work it. All right, let me try it. Wisdom works, so go work it. Thank you. Now, I feel particularly blessed because I get to start this off with Proverbs 1, verse 7. Many have called it the theme of Proverbs. I think it's actually the theme of all the wisdom literature. I'll make that case at the end. It tells us the way things are, and it begins with this. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. If we don't fear God, it affects everything about us. It impacts our relationship with money. It impacts our relationship with pleasure. It impacts our relationship with others. It impacts our relationship with ourselves. If we get this right, in one sense, we'll eventually get everything right. But if we get this wrong, we're gonna get everything wrong. Imagine trying to live in the world if you didn't understand gravity. You'd be all messed up, right? You wouldn't make it very far. And it's not that gravity is mean or malicious, it just is. And what God is telling us spiritually, the fear of the Lord is sort of that law of gravity. When we give into it, when we surrender it, when we acknowledge it, when we respect it, then we can live in this world that God has created. Now, let me stress, the fear of the Lord does not mean being frightened or terrified by God. One of the things that can hold us back is that we know what the word fear means. We know what the word Lord means. And we say, oh, fear of the Lord, he's telling me I should be scared of God. But that's not the case, because in the Hebrew, when you put these two words together, they form one distinct literary meaning. The technical term for this is called a syntam. A syntam. And what that means is that a word can mean something else. You put it with another word, and together they create their own distinctive literary unit. Try to explain this with English. We know what the word butter means, right? Comes from a cow, tastes great on toast. And we know what the word fly means. Pesky insect we don't like much. You put them together and you get butterfly. Now, understanding butter and fly doesn't help you understand what the word butterfly means. And the same thing is true here in the Hebrew. Understanding fear in Lord doesn't tell you all that you need to know about what the fear of the Lord is. Here's what the fear of the Lord actually means throughout all of the wisdom literature. It begins with trusting in God's commands and goodness. We know his commands are always rooted in his goodness. So we accept his higher understanding, a willingness to accept his higher understanding. He knows things we don't, and so we just accept that. It then means we surrender to his will. And it's not just being frightened of God, it's underscored by love and affection, but the love and affection are always tempered by an appropriate awe and reverence. Now, this is key. To fully fear God, we need all of the above. It's not picking 2 out of 3. To have the full expression of God, all that God promises us come to us, this has to be our attitude toward God. The way we think about God, the way we feel toward God, the way we act toward God. And if we will do this, this is what's so amazing. If we will do this, here's what God promises us will happen. The benefits, 7 benefits of fearing God. The first thing we're told is that God protects those who fear him. Psalm 115:11, all you who fear the Lord, trust the Lord. He's your helper and your shield. Or Psalm 33:18, the Lord watches over those who fear him. You know, Bernie Madoff has admitted that one of the things that got him in so much trouble, if you don't know that name, he created the biggest Ponzi scheme in history, built people out of billions of dollars. And he'd been successful as an investor, but he said he reached a point where his investors were demanding returns that just weren't possible with that current market. He just couldn't do it. And he didn't want to have the investors mad. He didn't want to lose his reputation as this huge, savvy investor, so he just quit trading, and he created this huge, gigantic Ponzi scheme, and it destroyed his life. He lost everything. He hasn't seen his wife in years. His son, one of his sons committed suicide, and now instead of living in opulence, he lives in prison and will die in prison. Now, if he was directed by the fear of the Lord, instead of fearing what his investors would say, instead of fearing the loss of his reputation, he would have feared the God who stands up for the widow and says, you can't throw her money away. He would have stood up for the senior citizen who put their investments there. And that's what this is saying, is that when we fear God, he protects us from bringing destruction on ourselves. We often think of following God as crowding out our desires. The Bible presents it as protective. Why? Well, let me get real. I have desires at times that if I acted on them, could destroy me. My reputation, my relationships, what I do. And sometimes I even act on those. And you know what? You do too. I'm not being that humble. This is the human situation. But learning and growing in the fear of the God helps me not act on those desires, or if I do act on those desires, doesn't let me be comfortable in those desires, so it doesn't become a habit, or worse, so it doesn't become an addiction. So just surrendering to God, having this attitude toward him, protects me from my worst desires and my worst actions. It's not an obligation. It's not a straitjacket. It is freedom. It is security. You are never as safe as you are than when you're living in the will and the fear of God. The second thing we're told is that God promises to guide those who fear him. Psalm 25:12, who are those who fear the Lord? He will show them the path they should choose. Fear unlocks God's light and truth. It's sort of like putting in a hearing aid. You fear God, suddenly you get what he's trying to say. It's like putting on goggles. All of a sudden, you can see the path before you that you were blinded to before. The third thing we're told is that those who fear God and their children will live in prosperity. Psalm 25, 12 through 13. Who are those who fear the Lord? They will live in prosperity. Their children will inherit the land. This isn't name it and claim it prosperity teaching. It's just the simple truth that God has set up a world in a certain way, and when you accept it, and we'll see it throughout the other wisdom literature, work hard, save, don't be materialistic, be generous with the poor. If you live that way, you end up prospering more often than not. And the reason is because wisdom works. All right. And the reason is because wisdom works. All right. I was just about going to get a fail from Ben there. All right. Number 4, God calls those who fear him friends. Look at that. Psalm 25, 14. This is precious. The Lord is a friend to those who fear him. When we enter into this kind of relationship and we call God, our name comes up on his smartphone. It's not some 1-800 telemarketer number. So I know this is my friend. Not only is it his name, we're on his favorites list. In fact, you have a unique dial tone, ringtone. I'm hoping mine is 70s music with the Bee Gees. I don't know about yours, but that'd be kind of cool if that's what happens when I'm calling out to God. Number 5, God shows mercy to those who fear him, and this is so powerful. Not just to you. If you get into this kind of relationship with God, God will show mercy to you and to your children and to your grandchildren. Psalm 103, 17 through 18. But the love of the Lord remains forever with those who fear him. His salvation extends to the children's children of those who are faithful to his covenant, of those who obey his commandments. How many of you would like to have the resources of a Bill Gates or a Warren Buffett? Not to spend it on yourself, but you think, man, what you could do for your children or your grandchildren, the trust that you could set up. What I'm about to say might sound ridiculous to some of you, but it's not hyperbole. According to the wisdom literature, if you fear God, you can leave a better inheritance behind. Psalm 61:5 says, you have given me the inheritance of those who fear your name. We've all read stories of the trust fund babies whose lives just become a wreck. That will never happen with the spiritual inheritance of someone who fears God. What this is telling us is that the power of fearing God, the spiritual blessings and riches of fearing God are so deep, so rich, and so long-lasting that when we do it, we leave behind a massive inheritance for our children and grandchildren, people that we never meet on this earth, perhaps. But they are blessed because we lived, just because we feared God. 6, we're told that God grants the desires of those who fear him. Psalm 145:19, he grants the desires of those who fear him. He hears their cries for help and he rescues them. Pretty self-explanatory. And then finally, 7th, I love this. It doesn't matter if you're famous or anonymous, if you rule or if you're a servant, if you're a CEO or an intern. If you fear God just where you are, he's going to bless you. Look at this Psalm 115:13. He will bless those who fear the Lord, both great and lowly. Remember when Jesus said, if you give somebody a cup of cold water because you love him, you get a prophet's reward? Maybe you're at the point in life where that's all you feel like you do. You could just be a giver of cold cups. But if you do that because you fear God, you get a tremendous reward. Which means you might be at a young stage in life. Do we have any kids here that you're not in your teen years yet? Raise your hands. You're not a teen yet, you're just starting out. So if you grow in the fear of the Lord and you see that your mom is having a bad day or your dad is having a bad day and your younger younger brother or sister is acting up, and you just go and encourage them, and you pray for them, or you help out your mom and dad, when you do that because you fear God, God speaks to you. You can be my representative here. I want you to help out your family. If you do that, you get the same reward as when Dr. Young preaches a great sermon to 20,000 people. Because you're doing it out of the fear of God. Young people, you don't have to grow up to be a Christian. You will be so blessed. You can be blessed right now if you start living out of the fear of God. Because, now you can take this out of context, take this in context. It doesn't matter what you do as much as it matters why you're doing it. And there's something about the fear of God that gets it rewarded, because it's not your great works that bring rewards. It's the great God you're doing it for who brings the reward. That's the way God has set up the world. Now, I look at this list, and frankly, I just want to say, who doesn't want this? Seriously, God says, this is the way I set up the world, so if you'll have this attitude toward me, basically, I'm going to protect you, I will guide you, I will bless not only you, but your children and your grandchildren with prosperity. I'm going to consider you a friend. I'll show you mercy. I'll fulfill your desires. That's what you get when you do this. Or you can rebel against God, face his wrath, and destroy yourself with your own stupid choices because you don't understand how gravity works and you don't understand how the fear of the Lord works. That's the way that wisdom presents it. These are the choices. These are the life. This is the life that we can live. Where I need to grow in this myself, there are times in my life where God will challenge me, just as a spiritual physician, not to make me feel awful or to lecture me. It's just sort of like a spiritual physician where Gary says, Gary, I know you. This is not good for you. I'm asking you to put this on the altar. I'm asking you to sacrifice it. I'm asking you to stop doing this. And I can become convinced in my quiet time that God is saying, Gary, you need to lay this down. I'm not going to preach on it because it might not be applicable to others. I'm not going to blog about it. Just for me, God is saying, let this go. And invariably, even though I'm convinced, as soon as that happens, I hear the ancient temptation that hit Adam and Eve. I'm convinced in the morning, then in the afternoon, I can hear Satan saying, did God really say? Are you sure, Gary? I mean, did God really say that? Did you just get up too early? Are you just being realistic? Did God really say? Then I'm sure it's just coincidence, but I will come across 2 or 3 blog posts that talk about why Christians should do that, and we don't want to be legalists, and we don't want to be fundamentalists, and so I flop back and forth. And I was doing that in one season of my life. And then in my devotional time, I came across the story of Abraham and Isaac, and this is why you want to be in Scripture every day. It's how the God we fear speaks to us. It's how he guides us. It's how he protects us. It's how he blesses us. God speaks again. I just couldn't get it any other way. And I'm across the story of Abraham and Isaac. And you remember that story where God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. And instead of objecting, the Bible tells us Abraham got up early the next morning to go do what God had told him to do. And as I'm reading this passage, it's like God is looking over my shoulder. And I'm sorry, but this hurt. And God was asking me, Gary, Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac, his only son. And you won't give up this? Shame, humiliation. Lord, I'm so sorry, I didn't. But God doesn't leave us in shame. He doesn't leave us in humiliation. He points the way so that we're not like that. And Proverbs 1:7 points to how I don't act that way. How can I be more like Abraham? How can I be willing to give what God has called me to give? What can happen? God tells us in his word what can happen. Why do you think Abraham was willing to make an amazing sacrifice and we're not? Maybe you are. Why I'm not? It's because he feared God. You might think, Gary, that's too convenient. You're preaching on Proverbs 1:7. You're just trying to read that into it. Look, don't take my opinion. You shouldn't. Guys, bring up Genesis chapter 22. God tells us what was going on. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. Don't lay a hand on the boy. Don't hurt him in any way. Wait for it. For now I know that you truly fear God. You've not withheld from me even your son, your only son. Do you read that story? What is going on? That's what's going on. Before God could use Abraham, he had to get this settled. Abraham, do you fear me or do you fear others? Do you fear your family? Do you fear your reputation? Do you fear me? Before God can do a monumentally important work in your life, before God can fully empower you to be the person God created you to be, this has to be your base. You have to fear God. And there are going to be moments in your life when you don't want to do what you think God has called you to do. And those are the crossroads. Those are sort of the Isaac moments where God is saying, I'm letting you face this. I'm not going to make it easy for you because I want to use you. I want you to have a life that I created you to live. But if you don't have this down, nothing's going to go right. So can I just ask you, do you know God is convicting you of something, but you keep holding on to it? Can I just point out, he could ask you for so much more. And are you going to let it go? Not hide behind doctrine. I'm saved by grace through faith. I don't want to be legalistic. You know what? If I keep dating him, maybe he'll become a Christian. I'm really doing it for God, not myself. I don't want to be like one of those. I mean, others are doing it. Why can't I do it? You just trust God as your spiritual physician. When he says, let it go, will you choose to let it go? You see, it's not about whether you go to heaven when you die. The wisdom literature is for this life. It's whether you will fear God while you live on this earth. To have that kind of life. I want to direct you away from being so obsessed about where you will be 10,000 years from now that you miss the glory and power of how you can live right now. And so what drives you? There are really two differences, big differences between those who fear God and don't. Those who don't fear God obey reluctantly because they don't want to be punished. They worship because they think they should. They're always asking, is this a sin? Because they want to test the limits of disobedience. They want to go right up to the edge. Can I just say there is no joy in that Christianity. There's no peace. There's no empowering presence. There's no overcoming. It is really, I think, a very sad life. Like being forced to eat raw kale when you don't even like kale just because you think you're supposed to. But there's a different life. The life that Proverbs 1:7 calls us to, the life of fearing God. Those people think of obedience in a relational way. For me, to live is Christ. Worship because you want to be relishing God's presence and power. Instead of asking, is this a sin? You ask, is this wise? Because you want to experience the fullness of God's protective grace. You know there's goodness behind his commands. You know he wants to bless you. You know he wants to prosper you. And so if you find yourself spinning your wheels in the Christian life, deal with the symptom, deal with the disease, not the symptoms. It's not just focusing on not sinning. Pray and study to fear God. Because the more you fear God, the more you grow in the fear of God, the more sin loses its hold on your life and your thinking. Holiness does not make us fear God. Fearing God makes us holy. Holiness is a product, not the method, of a right relationship with God. When I was growing up, my mom would like to watch television in the morning, and there was this popular show back then called Let's Make a Deal with Monty Hall. I don't know if it's still on. But sort of the thing they'd always do, you're trying to make deals, and then at the end, there would be this thing where Monty Hall would say, all right, Bob, show her what she's won. Some stupid donkey or llama or something like that. And then he'll say, show her what she could have won. And it'll be a great car, a Lexus, a Mercedes-Benz, or something like that. Here's what Proverbs and the wisdom literature says the fear of the Lord will do for you. If you fear God, you will always pick the right curtain. And you know why? Because God knows what's behind every curtain. He sees even into the future. And it's not just a God, it's the God who loves you, who wants to protect you, who wants to guide you, who says he wants to bless you and prosper you. Why would you ever live outside of the fear of God when he knows what's behind the curtains? He says, pick this one, not that one. So let's recap. I know we went through so much. It's usually online at that you can watch the sermon again by Tuesday or so, or you can get the CDs. But I want to recap this. I know we covered a lot. The fear of God is this. It's trusting in God's commands and goodness. He's good. There's a reason for his commands. It's a willingness to accept his higher understanding. Don't argue with him. Surrender to his will. Let your relationship be one not of fright, but love and affection. But let that be tempered by awe and reverence. And remember, the fear of God is all of the above. You don't get to pick and choose. If you want that full relationship with God, it's all of the above. Now, Solomon, there's 5 wisdom books. Solomon was involved in 3. We're talking about Proverbs. He started Proverbs 1:7. He wrote another wisdom book that we won't mention because there are kids present. But there is a 3rd wisdom book, and what's that? Ecclesiastes. And remember I said, I don't think this is just a theme of Proverbs. I think it's a theme of all of wisdom literature. Ecclesiastes is essentially an experiment where a man who is incredibly wealthy and incredibly powerful decides to test, is this really the way things are? Maybe there is a different life that I want to live. And so he gives himself over to everything. If there's something he wants to eat, he eats it. If there's something he wants to drink, he drinks it. If there's a woman he wants, he goes after her. If there's a pleasure to experience, he experiences it. He says, I denied myself nothing. And what he found is that the experience failed. And so he comes up to the grand summary. One of the first verses in wisdom literature, Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And then the last verse in Ecclesiastes, as Solomon sort of brings everything to an end, chapter 12, verse 13, this is the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. You get this right, everything goes right. You get this wrong, you're going to be hit by a spiritual Escalade going 50 miles per hour. They'll hit you halfway to San Antonio because wisdom works.